Hey everybody, how's it going? So in a recent video, I went over about fixing the DMCA. It was a proposed amendment to the DMCA, but in particular Section 1201, which goes over exemptions to the DMCA for copy for. See, this is why I record things instead of stream. Which is what goes over your making it illegal to get around digital locks. So, for instance, if you have an Xbox and you want to be able to change the optical drive in that Xbox, it's not going to work because it's paired to the CPU of the device. And if you make a tool that gets around that, you may actually be breaking Section 1201 of the DMCA. If you ever use DVD decryptor to rip a movie that you had so that you could watch it on another device that you own, because a portable phone or a Cohen A2 MP3 player won't be able to play a DVD, the act of ripping that DVD that you own to put it on a device that you own would be illegal because DVD decryptor decrypts the copy protection in the DVD. And this piece of legislation does its best to try to create a carve out for this, as you can see here. HR 6566. And there was a piece in the Hill that says proposed repair bill goes too far. And it just is your typical copied and pasted fear mongering piece on how this is going to result in piracy and all this type of other stuff. So I did a 5 or 10 minute video ranting about it, but here I thought I'd bring on an actual expert. This is Nathan Proctor from US Perg. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, good to be here.
So you said that this is a giant piece of misinformation and that they most likely will not be punished for releasing it. What specifically makes this misinformation? Because I can say what makes me angry about this, but what makes what's in this text not true?
All right, so the argument that they're making, and let me just a clarification. You kind of said, oh, DVD encryptor, that would be unrelated to this particular bill. This bill is just repair.
Yeah, so I personally don't think this even goes far enough because I don't think something like DVD decryptor should even be illegal. But this bill doesn't even do that.
Right. I mean, there's a totally separate conversation to be had about just how bad the Section 1201 of the DMCA is and why companies are allowed to put these locks on things without any kind of proof that what you're doing to avoid the lock or to get around the lock is illegal in any way, right? So but especially the framing that this bill legalizes piracy is just false, right? This bill goes out of its way to say repair is not a copyright violation. I just struggle to even find an example theoretically where I'm saying like, oh, you're not allowed to fix that thing and it's a copyright violation if you do. When would that be an appropriate idea? Like, when does that make sense? Like, literally, it's like, in what situation are you taking the copyright away from the original manufacturer by fixing something that you own?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best steelman I can of his argument, and the best one that I could possibly think of is, let's say that you force, I don't know, a monitor or an HDMI capture card manufacturer to release everything about the device that would be related to repairing it. Maybe you could get around HDCP, and if you can get around HDCP, maybe you could make it so that, I don't know, you'd be able to output a signal that could then be captured so that you could get a Netflix video and upload it at 4K instead of pirating it at 720p or something like that. Or like with game consoles, maybe if you are able to use that tool, maybe you could pair a CD-ROM drive that is willing to play pirated games to the CPU or something like that. But
yeah, but all of that it doesn't fall under the scope of this bill, right? So if you're saying that like any legitimate repair is not illegal, that's basically what this bill says. And helping other people fix things, creating tools and methods that allow people to get around repair restrictions will no longer be considered criminal activity. That's what this bill says. Anything that actually does facilitate piracy would not be covered in that definition, right? Like if you actually made a tool that let you fix your Xbox and also let you play pirated media, that tool would be illegal. And the penalties in the DMCA are huge. You could go to prison for 5 years, for making a tool that would do that. So yeah, the idea that this is going to legalize piracy is crazy. Like they're saying it's like a slippery slope, but it's not, right? It's like anything that allows you to do piracy is still illegal. So just let us fix the thing. And it's crazy to me that these companies could, lock the cooling fan with digital rights management technology so you can't fix it and then say, oh, it's a slippery slope if we let it. Like they're the ones who put that stupid lock on in the first place. They get what's coming to them.
I agree with you completely. And I think if I were to steel man their argument, the slippery slope is that virtually everybody that supports this particular amendment would likely also support just removing Section 1201 of the DMCA. Like, I personally don't think that it should be against the law for you to be able to take the movie that you owned, rip that movie, encode it into a video format that you could play on a portable player and play it on that, rather than say, I'm going to carry an iPod and a portable DVD player in 2006. Like, that was just so like nobody, literally nobody did that. Virtually everybody was breaking this law in some way, shape, or form. So I think what they're saying with the slippery slope is that everybody who supports this would also support just flicking 1201 of the DMC out entirely. But that's not even what this article says. It specifically says that what is written over here is going to encourage and allow piracy that would otherwise would not have happened. And as I read this, I can't see how this would allow that in any way at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware that the opposition takes people like me and says, "Oh, like, well, if you do what Nathan wants us to do, really, where I'm like a techno anarchist or something like that, and if you followed my advice, I'll just destroy the modern economy." Um, but I kind of used to that at this point, but it's like at least make an argument accurate on the merits of the bill. Like Mondaire Jones put time and effort into writing this bill. I think he did a pretty darn good job of articulating what I think is a very reasonable middle ground, which is, you got to let us fix the thing. Like, it's clearly not a copyright violation to repair something. And he did a pretty careful bill that does just that. And honestly, there's a lot of people who like you, Lewis, think that we should be pushing a much broader agenda on the DMCA. But really, we're just sticking to this repair thing because we know that this impacts regular people and the way that they're living their lives. They just want to, to me, one of the biggest examples of why we care about this policy are things like John Deere tractors, which I know you've covered a lot on this channel. You can get like a aftermarket tool to fix or to diagnose or fix problems with cars, right? Like, you can get a scan tool at Pep Boys. It's not expensive tool to figure out why your check engine light is on. There is nothing like that for a John Deere tractor, and the equipment is locked using these digital locks to prevent any kind of access to their diagnostics, etc., or resetting the equipment after a failure. And you're locked. You have to get the dealer to plug in their computer. And it would be incredibly useful to farmers in America if they could go to their local ag supply store and they could buy a tool that would let them diagnose and service their equipment. And but you can't make that tool right now. That tool is criminal because of the way that we've made this overly broad section of copyright law, and we need to fix that.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of people will say is these people with right to repair, why don't they just come up with their own tools? Why don't they just come up with their own software? Why don't they just make their own chip? They're just whining. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that there's so many barriers in place to being able to do that. If somebody comes up with a tool that allows me to get around a lock, that person, like, who wants to risk going to prison for 5 years over that? That's going to absolutely destroy the market. People are still doing it. People still made DVD decryptor, even though there was that section in the DMCA that said you could go to prison for 2 to 5 years for doing so. But that's going to radically increase the barrier to entry to really smart people to reverse engineer these things. And like one thing,
you can get tools, but you can't get you're not going to get Snap-on to make a tool, right? Because you're not going to get these, premier like big brands to do it because they'd be nervous about the legal exposure. And clearing out this barrier for that just allows those companies to make those tools. And I think that's really important to put that competition in that market.
Yeah, it's going to be some random guy in a VPN, an IRC that's from Russia that's in his, in a basement
somewhere. And who
somewhere.
knows what the hell else is in that tool?
Yeah, God knows. And it says here, like, unfortunately, the Freedom to Repair Act makes no distinction between specific areas where carve-outs could be useful to devices where self-repair is needed, like agriculture or cell phone screens, and allowing hacking tools used for piracy. But it doesn't make a distinction between it because repair is not piracy. And like, that should be the end of it right there. Now, do you think that you've spoken to me at length about how certain politicians in certain states have fell for really, really silly arguments, along the lines of you need to have an exemption here in this repair bill that says that this will not apply if you're a student at a college where the college provided you the laptop because there could be data theft, where they'll always try to muddy the waters. Have these arguments actually stuck in the heads of any legislators so far? Is there anybody out there that would read this article and think, oh, wow, I didn't really think about piracy, reject?
I mean, the idea, I've talked to a lot of judiciary staff in the U.S. Congress about this bill, I think that, I mean, certainly lawmakers the prospect of piracy is something that they would take seriously, right? They don't want to make it easier for people to pirate things. So my sense is that muddying the water on that is probably their best move. The problem is that their argument makes no sense. Anything that would enable piracy would be out of scope, right? If you had a tool that lets you fix your tractor and also, I don't know, play pirated Britney Spears song on the tractor's sound system or something, you could still pursue that tool maker under the DMCA for a violation and put them in prison. And they have these incredibly powerful anti-piracy tools. And, I mean, honestly, I've had a number of conversations where I've flipped lawmakers on this particular topic by asking the question, like, what repairs should be a copyright violation in your opinion? Like, what things should I not be able to fix because of copyright? And the answer is nothing. So they're saying, oh, they didn't carve out devices. I think they mean they didn't say you're not allowed to fix gaming consoles because of copyright. Well, it's like, you should be able to fix gaming. That's the carve out is for repair, not for the device, right? I should be allowed to fix my cooling fan and change out the optical drive or whatever, as long as it's in the service of repair and not some other thing. And that's exactly why we don't need a carve out. It's already narrow because it's just repair. And then we can have a conversation another day about, how to fix the problems that we have, around basically the overreach in the DMCA. But let's at least fix this problem that we can all agree is, I mean, even these copyright guys agree that we should be able to fix these tractors. But, the offices that I've talked to on the Hill, they've basically heard, like, everyone has heard from John Deere already on this. So John Deere is like the number one group that I've heard about that's been working to defeat this policy, because they do not want any other tool out there that lets a farmer fix a tractor besides their tool, which they, have exclusive access to the dealers, or you can buy some crappy version of for like hundreds of dollars a month in fees. It's, this is a total racket that they're trying to protect.
How can normal everyday people get technically illiterate legislators to understand that it is ridiculous to compare piracy to repair? What is their best line of attack? What is their best one-liner that they could?
I would say that, like, one advantage of doing a bill in Congress versus the states is that the staff are much more professional, right? So it's like, and they have a much more limited portfolio of things. I think that I don't think it's about like convincing them that this argument is stupid. I think it's mostly convincing them that people care, right? That it's important for them to get an answer to the question, does this really allow people to pirate video games or movies if I let someone fix something? Like, the staffers, if they actually asked that question and investigated, they would come to the answer that no, it does not. Anybody who takes a second to think about it can figure it out. The question is whether or not they hear the opposition argument for 2 seconds and be like, oh, this is too complicated, I don't want to figure this out. So if people just reach out to lawmakers' offices and say, we have stuff that we would fix, but we can't because it's a copyright violation, that's crazy. Just let us fix stuff. It shouldn't be a crime to fix something because the manufacturer decided to, put a lock over the cooling fan in my Xbox or something. Like, that's a corporate abuse. Let me fix my stuff. If that message goes through, I feel like we'll get some good momentum. And there has been some good momentum on this policy. We've been having some success. I think, because I think it's common sense, right? It shouldn't be illegal to fix things and to make tools that let other people fix things.
Let's say somebody comes up against this particular argument. Like the argument, okay, let's say that somebody comes up with a tool, they reverse engineer whatever Microsoft's design is to be able to pair a different optical drive than to the console than the one that came with it, and that also allows you to pair an optical drive that doesn't care if it's reading a burned disk. How would you distinguish between that tool when used for piracy versus when used for legitimate reasons? Like my stock answer to that would be, I don't care F section 1201 of the DMCA entirely, but that's obviously not a politically friendly answer.
I mean, I feel like one, you have an exemption already under the DMCA because it was argued and won to pair to circumvent the pairing system in those things to pair a new optical drive. Two, I'm afraid I don't know enough about the technology to know like how you would convince the system to bypass the way that it knows that a product is playing pirated media, but I would assume a tool that would do that would still be illegal. So I don't think, and I don't, my understanding of the technology, and I could be wrong, and there might be someone watching this that would helpfully answer this, but my sense of the technology is that you could pair a new drive and the encryption software and the anti-piracy software that detects pirated media is irrelevant to making it recognize the disk drive. So it's not a question of like, oh, this disk drive is a pirated media playing disk drive. That it's just a disk drive. That is actually done by software, in the main processor. So I mean, again, I could be wrong. I'm not a technician. This is why we're going to bring in some experts to tell Congress about this. But my sense is if it did pair a drive that would allow it to play pirated media, then it wouldn't be repair. It would have other uses and therefore would be illegal. And I'm sure that like no matter what, if Microsoft found someone doing that, they would use the full powers of copyright protection to stop that. But you should, I mean, like, but I don't think that like the anti-encryption is not on the optical drive. It's in the software, embedded into the computer. And that was what was argued in front of the Copyright Office, and they agreed with that. That like, no, this is not, getting around this particular lockout for pairing an optical drive does not equal piracy.
I agree with you. What do you think the chances are this year or over the next year of something like this actually being amended and passed versus past years, and why?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, Congress is obviously a very strange place to try to do things. There's a lot of competing things going on, and it's kind of a crazy environment. I think right to repair continues to surprise politicians. Like they think they just underestimate how much people care about this, and then we come in and we've been turning some heads. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to get that to happen. And obviously we've got a lot of momentum, with New York passing a bill, Colorado passing the wheelchair bill, with a really great review from the Copyright Office last fall, the FTC report, the Biden administration support. So I mean, I'm optimistic. I do think that there's a lot of factors that go into what happens, but I mean, fixing copyright is going to be an important part of right to repair, even if we pass like a bill in every state, right? Because states can't touch copyright. And if you can't have competing tools, if all you can have is Apple's tool, we're always going to have this, like creep where Apple's going to try to find funky ways, or these companies that have dominant market power, they're going to try to find funky ways to limit repair access. And this is a great way to protect like competition, because if somebody else can make a tool that does it, and we don't need Apple's tools. Like now that we see their 79 pounds of tools that they're shipping to people, you're like, oh yeah, I mean, maybe some shops will use those tools, and the water resealing tool, I know some shops really like that already, but most of it's like, oh yeah, like the way I was doing it before is way better than the way that Apple's doing it. Like they do not have a monopoly on good tools, and they shouldn't have a monopoly on legal tools that you can sell and use.
I agree completely. Yeah, 'cause the biggest challenge over the past year has been trying to shake my subscribers out of the general cynicism that it doesn't matter what you do, nobody will listen, nobody will care, no progress will ever happen. And doesn't mean we're done, but the bill passing in Colorado, the bill passing in New York State, the FTC report just pretty much taking all the manufacturer excuses and just putting them through a chipper shredder. That
Yeah.
stuff, that stuff matters. And like, I really would like to actually see progress on this. And like, you've been engaging, and we've also been engaging in lobbying to try and get stuff like this passed and get Section 1201 of the DMCA have a couple more repair exemptions, and hopefully we
Yeah, I
win.
mean, these repair exemptions have been like ramping up continually. And just a shout out to, iFixit and Public Knowledge, which is an organization that fights for these. A lot of it's done by like free legal clinics at universities and stuff like that, going against like the white shoe, the highest paid intellectual property law firms in DC, and they're just kicking their butts. And that it's kind of cool, like this scrappy, world of like tinkerers and DIYers and hackers is outdoing these, white shoe law firms and stuff. But that DMCA exemption process is really limited in how much good it does, because it's like, yeah, you have a legal right to hack your phone to get around Apple's pairing system with the front facing camera, for example, on the iPhone 13. You have a right to bypass that. But like, you really can't. I mean, you need someone else to help you with that. That's a pretty difficult task. I mean, the FBI couldn't get around the fingerprint lockout, asking a repair shop and you can't even make a tool. So even if you could do it, you could only do it for yourself. And I think it's, that basis, like all those years of fighting for the exemptions and getting the Copyright Office to say, you're right, it's not infringing activity to fix a phone. Now that we need to just make that permanent and extend that so that we can stop having that fight. So, I mean, we have a lot of momentum on this topic. I mean, and your audience, as cynical as they might seem sometimes, has been a huge part of the momentum that we've actually made. And I don't know if we would be in the place we are now with the wins we've had if it wasn't for them coming in and helping support the work that happened in Colorado and everything else. Like, they were a huge part of it. So thank you guys, everyone listening. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very appreciative for what they've all provided, monetarily, activism wise, and everything else. Thank you very much for taking the time. I'll include.
Can I just say one more thing? Because I feel like you mentioned that I was saying these people are lying to us, and it drives me crazy. Like, when the lobbyists come in and say, listen, this legalizes piracy tools, I mean, that's just blatantly false. Nothing in this bill makes piracy legal. You could make an argument that, a tool that could repair maybe could also be used for piracy, and that might be a little gray area, but like, no, that would still be illegal. Like, piracy is illegal. That's just a lie. That framing is lying. And it should cost something to these companies to go in there and lie to lawmakers face to face about important public policy issues. One of the key ways to make it cost something is if their constituents come in and say, you need to do something about this. This is bullcrap. And we're all part of that. Like, honesty should count. Truth should count. But all of us need to kind of make it count.
Okay, so this brings up an interesting conversation, and maybe I'm going to be prolonging this a little bit. But I remember there was this one particular lobbyist that had said that that independents would be installing TikTok on people's phones. And I remember doing a video saying, like, "Yo, this is bullshit," and I put "This guy is clueless" in the thumbnail. And I remember getting a call from you saying that there were, you and I remember Kyle, I believe, saying this may not be great. You're going to be portrayed as a bully. They're going to be able to portray us as bullies, and that stuff actually worked. And what I found the most interesting is that 3 months ago, Samsung, which is a member of CTA, which he was a lobbyist for, actually started pre-installing TikTok on the lower end Samsung phones by default. And the point.
I did find your video on that topic.
The point, I guess the question that I have is how do you, if somebody is going to be able to lie and get away with it, and when you call them out and say, yo, this guy just made something up about our industry, this is an idiot. How do you do that without getting in trouble? Because there are a lot of people that have watched stuff like that have used a lot more colorful and more disgusting language than I've used. But like, it's very difficult for me to temper myself when I hear blatant lies about our industry told. And one of the things that really adds to the cynicism that a lot of my audience, and admittedly I have, because they're getting it from me, is that there's no consequence to that. There's, if I say something and I'm slightly wrong, people will remember it 6 years later and cite it. But when they make something up like that, and then not only are they wrong, but the company that they represent is doing the exact thing that it is they're accusing us of doing, it just gets brushed under the rug and nobody cares. How do you deal with that in a manner
Yeah.
where they can't run to the legislators and go, this man on the internet is bullying me? Because
Well, first of all, it's been a long road for me to be working in like American public policy and trying to help people have a better society and a better government. And a long time ago, I realized that, oh, if you want to be like a moral, ethical person in a world where not everyone acts that way, your job is harder in the short term. And that's just true. Like we don't, it's not fair. Like no one said it was going to be fair and it's not fair. And I don't care about it being fair anymore. I've given up. I know what the right thing to do is, and I was raised to do the right thing. So I'm going to try to do the right thing. And if some lawmaker, some lobbyist for some corporate giant gets paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to say complete malarkey, like whatever, I'm going to, scrabble and do the right thing and speak the truth as best I can and investigate every idea and try to really get to the bottom of things as best I can and be as honest and straightforward as I can. And that's just because that's just the way to be. And that's the way I want to be. I don't want to be a liar. So, and eventually the truth wins out. It's frustrating and it's a longer road and we have to work harder, but whatever. Like we know that we're doing the right thing. And at the end of the day, it's like, this is like ancient. There's David wrote Psalms about this, right? The wicked have it easy and the righteous have to work harder. That's just the way that it is. You have a choice to make. You could be a jerk, you could be an asshole, you could have an easier life being a tool to people, or you could be a decent person that tries to make things better and improves life for people. And you have that choice to make every day. And I'm glad that, I'm proud of the decisions that I've made, and I don't envy people who have sold out to the dark side, right? I don't think that they benefit from that. I think I reap all the benefits from my choices. So it does make you cynical, but you just have to just swallow it and just say, okay, it's going to be hard and we're going to do it. And that's what winning makes me feel so good. Like just like they have to just watch us win now. They did all this stuff. They lied. They pull all these dirty tricks, and we still pass this bill. Like they just have to watch it, and they still have to live with everything that they've done and all the behavior that they've put forward and the way that they've sacrificed their ethics. They have to live with that. But we didn't do that, and we still won.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will be moral. I will be ethical. I will be honest. I'm not going to be polite. I'll be an asshole. Like if somebody says we're going to install TikTok on shit, if somebody says we're going to install TikTok on shit, I will I don't care. If they want to go to a legislator and say I'm a bully, I'm mean, this guy with a receding hairline on the internet called me a name, I can't help myself. But thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and I agree with you. Watching the wins and watching the looks on their faces as we win, and they have to take their arguments down and try to erase everything that they've said on the internet, like right to repair is going to, get people sexually assaulted in a parking lot and supports racism and redlining and all the junk from the Massachusetts campaigns. Somebody pointed out yesterday in my live stream that all of that was removed from the internet. Why can't I find any of this outside of your video? It's because they know they were making this shit up. They know it's not true and they're ashamed of it. They don't want to have somebody from Honda or Nissan or General Motors knock on their door and say, did you use the money that we raised to say that right to repair results in people getting sexually assaulted and stalked through parking lots? Like, really? What don't attach our name to this.
And these companies, like, we've gone on long enough, but one day we'll talk about, like, when we expose what the lobbyists say, sometimes that blows back on the companies and they didn't even realize what these people were saying. So like this work that you do to like highlight some of this stuff is important, because then we could go to these companies like, do you know that the people you've hired are saying this complete nonsense? Like they just get hired to stop the bill, and then they say whatever they want to say. I mean, that's kind of how it works. So yeah, it's important to expose that, because we have to remove their credibility in order that they know what the truth is. And thank you and all your listeners for helping be part of that.
Thank you for all the work that you've done as well. You can find him on Twitter, Nathan Proctor. I'll include a link down below the moment the stream is over. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this. I really appreciate it. All right. See you next one.